Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Transition Roadmap. I am so honored to have Marcy McNeal here with us, who is joining us again for another episode. And Marcy, I just want to welcome you back.
Thank you for having me again, Elizabeth. It's really great to be with you. It was so much fun to do our first conversation. Looking forward to sharing some new learnings and insights for folks today.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought, Marcy, just for those people who did not see the prior podcast, just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background and some of your, just what your focus is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm actually a native of Colorado, even though I don't live there now. But I went to Colorado State University, got a degree in business, but actually then immediately went into nonprofit. So I have led a few nonprofit organizations and spent the most recent part of my career really teaching and coaching and training nonprofit organizations on how to reach sustainability for their missions. So had the distinct privilege to work with over 350 different nonprofit organizations, helping them raise over $400 million to fulfill on their missions. And, through the course of that work, had so many opportunities to interact with really wonderful business owners, because they are really, small business owners, media, all businesses are so critical to that nonprofit sector. And so got to work with them as board members, as donors, and, just have such a profound respect for the role they play in our communities and the role they play in, in that social network of nonprofits and that third sector of our industries. And just so appreciate them and love the opportunity to bring those learnings from my coaching and experiences there to the work that we do at the Transition Strategists. It's really, it's been a great transition for me and a great fit, I think, to really bring that expertise and that experience that I have. So thank you for having me back again.
Well, I'm excited. So, So, in our last episode that we did together, we were talking a little bit about social and emotional intelligence. And one of the comments that you made, that it wasn't just about your awareness, but it actually was also about your behavior, right? Not just that you're aware of what you're doing, but the actual behavior. So why don't we start there and kind of pick up on that, and then we'll move through our podcast.
Perfect. Wonderful. So I think, one of the things is social and emotional intelligence in particular has very much sort of become more known in just our general culture. And a lot of people think, well, I'm emotionally intelligent if I'm just aware of how I feel and what my emotions are. And that's just one very small slice of it. And what you're really pointing to, and I think is a distinct piece of emotional intelligence, is the accurate self-assessment. You may feel a certain way and you might be able to say, oh, I know that I'm frustrated. But the accurate self-assessment is, but do you know why? And are you going to take a moment to actually choose your response to why you're frustrated? The other piece of the accurate self-assessment is, are you actually aware of how your behaviors, reactions, choices are impacting others? And oftentimes, if we keep assessment to just a one-way view, like of what we think, what our assessment is, most of the time it's going to be inaccurate. Have you actually checked it out with other people? Have you actually been able to notice how people respond when you walk in the room? And is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do you ever ask your people in your business or in that you have relationships with about, how when you fly off the handle, when you're upset, how does that impact them? Do you even have visibility of that? It might impact them in a way that isn't positive or really building, making your relationship stronger. So that accurate self-assessment piece is not simple, and it takes effort. It takes practice. And that's what I work with all of my coaching clients on, is that, I'm not a believer that emotional intelligence is a switch that you can just say, okay, I'm going to be emotionally intelligent now. It's a practice. It takes intention. It takes, really working on and recognizing not just yourself, but how you impact others. And I think it's a valuable skill. And it's not easy. It's not easy to say, maybe I don't really know how I'm impacting others. And I'm going to be vulnerable enough to check it out and actually ask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when, in our work that we do, we're dealing with people that are shifting and changing at all times. And I was just on I just had a wonderful meeting with a person, and we were talking about just living your best life and enjoying that. And I think every person goes through a transition from the very beginning all the way through to the very end of life. We're always growing, we're always learning. And as we get into kind of our career years, we're trying to figure out, what's my purpose? Why do I want to do this? Just how am I going to be fulfilled by some of these activities? And then as we get in, and let's say you're the entrepreneur owner and you're starting the company and you're building and growing it, at some point in time, you get towards the end of that career, the end of that time, when you're starting to learn new skills and new things that help you to transition into a role of like a journey of leaving instead of a journey of building and growing. You're in the journey of transitioning knowledge and everything like that, and actually becoming a mentor and a teacher instead of the doer. So how does that social and emotional intelligence and the behavior and the self-assessment play into that transition as people are trying to figure out how to either come in or try to leave? Either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. When you think about, let's first look at what is it like and how does it play into when someone's trying to leave. There's there's that accurate self-assessment, and then there's that other awareness, being aware of and being able to to stop and sort of look up from what's happening and say, how are other people reacting to this? It's important to be very keyed into yourself. But that can then alienate people. It can exclude people from wanting to participate. You might make the mistake of not inviting people to participate because you're really just so focused and kind of in that myopic view. But to be able to stop and actually, inquire, how are the people around me doing? And it may not be because of you. It may be because as you're transitioning, the transition is getting on them too. They might not be technically transitioning, but it's going to impact everything about your organization, all of the people in it, people outside of it. It's going to have a far-reaching impact. So to be able to stop and really check in and see, be aware and curious, how are the other people around me doing? And what role do I play in that, if any? But most likely there is a role to play. There is communication to be had. Again, there's mentoring and coaching, which is one of the core competencies it's one of the competencies of emotional intelligence. How is the trust? Building trust is another area. So, for someone transitioning out, it can, if it's not a thoughtful, well laid out process with a plan and a destination, it can become just a push. Like, just how do I survive it? How do I just get through it so I can get to the other side and be done? And that's when you'll leave. This is a terrible term, but you don't want to leave roadkill. You don't want to leave the people just like thrown to the side. It's that people first and really valuing those relationships. So I think for somebody transitioning out, it could be tempting at sometimes to be like, oh, I can't wait to wash my hands of this because it's hard. Yeah. But there's so much value in stopping and seeing how other people are doing and being impacted. Now, for the person that's transitioning in or maybe transitioning to a new role, maybe they've already been there, they're transitioning to the new role as owner, becoming an entrepreneur, whatever the scenario is, there's value in them, in their accurate self-assessment, particularly around the mindset. Their own mindset of how they approach taking on relationships. How are they building trust in a new way or at a new level? Maybe that's with the same people that they've worked with, but now it's a different actual relationship. So how does the trust need to adapt? How does that feel different? And are you checking in with people on how it's going? And are you being adaptable as you're going into that new role? Are you open to the coaching and mentoring of the person who is leaving? That's a place where you have the potential for significant conflict. If it's, I know what I need to do, and your old way is not needed anymore. And that's going to be, that's ouch. That's ouch. That's a terrible. Big ouch. Exactly.
Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, definitely. So it's, that the mindset of, it's easy for a person coming in to really be focusing on what's next. How do I get to where I've proven myself, or how do I get the organization, the entity, to the next thing that I want to achieve? But again, you don't want to leave people in your wake. You need those people. They're the ones that are going to actually help you get there. So it's really, really continuing to be looking at the impact on others, that other awareness of others, and of how they're being impacted and where they're at is really key, and can definitely have a very positive impact on a transition, but it could also take it the other way, be negative.
So what comes to mind for me is just the need to have some transparency, some vulnerability, to have open communications and things like that. And I think there's a belief out there that that transitioning out of your business, even if it's a short period or a long roadmap, could be years, but that transition is something that you don't want to talk about, and you want to keep it a secret because it has the potential to frighten people around you. And so it's kind of interesting, that belief or that mindset that maybe we shouldn't talk and we shouldn't go that direction when everybody's wondering anyway. And without the transparency, you don't have a way to check in to see how you are influencing and impacting others.
Absolutely. I actually had a coach once, and she helped me see that I actually tend to be a little bit that way, and I have to work at it. I tend to sort of go into my space and think of ideas, and I want to have them be fully formed and, completed before I share them, but then you get attached. And there's nothing wrong with having a clear plan and a clear direction. But if there's not some flexibility and adaptability, and you get too attached to how it's going to go, you are almost guaranteeing significant conflict, because you're just not willing to consider within a framework of where you want to get to. You're not willing to consider how this might look. You might not be willing to consider, that person who I thought would be great at this has absolutely no interest in that, but they have interest in this over here. Am I going to explore that with them, or am I going to stick with, no, this is your only path? And that's a great example of like just getting too stuck on that mindset of I have the answer, I have all of the details figured out, and everyone better fall in line. because I see it's going to look like this when it's done, which is ironic in a transition, because when it's done, it means you're gone. So it's, it is kind of interesting, and it's something that people can definitely work on, making sure that they do become more open and exploratory. Again, that doesn't mean you just sort of, your direction changes and where you're headed is up for, complete negotiation. As the owner, you do know where you want to get to, and that's fine. But to be flexible in who comes along and what seat they have in the journey is hugely important. It's hugely important. So, yeah. And the transparency, the transparency, the point you started with was the transparency of being open to letting people know, sharing with people, like, here's where I'm at in the journey. It may not be time for you to have comments on it, but I'm letting you know where I'm at. And you can trust that I have the best of intent to bring you in as soon as the space for those comments and those ideas and suggestions and conversations, I'll invite you in, type of thing. So
and it's so interesting too, because many times, well, that's why we believe that the transition is a journey, because the owners typically you don't know what's in front of you. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's happening with your health or health around you, up to and including you don't know what's happening with your potential successors. And it's so, we believe that we've got this roadmap in front of us. I've heard so many times owners will tell me that they just can't go talk to or really discuss some of the transition with either family members or non-family members who are in the business. And the reason why is because I think as the owner CEO, typically you probably learned that whatever you say, people start to move. Right? So if you say, hey, we're going into this area, they'll start to go, okay, guess what? We're going into that area. Because why? Because the owner says so. That's what we're doing. And when you get into this transition space, there are many unknowns and so many puzzle pieces that have to come into place that sometimes take a while to get in place and to kind of, shape and design, that the owners are afraid to actually say something because they're afraid it's going to be like a promise. Yeah. And that promise, then they have to keep it and they don't know if they can. Don't know if it's going to come together that way.
In that instance, you actually remind me of something that happened with a client recently. But in that instance, the very best thing that a successor can bring is empathy, because that empathy gives the space or creates the space for that owner to know it's okay to not know every single step right now. The what won't be helpful is when a successor is impatient and you need to make a decision now. And I need to know now, and you can't change your mind. And, to sort of demand that decisiveness without and not allow space for incidents and things that are going to happen that are unknown, right? The unknowns. Then you can understand why an owner might be like, well, I don't want to talk about this with anybody because it might be construed as, well, this is exactly the path we're going down. And then they feel caught, like, oh, but what if I discover that it's not the right one? And it's not the best one.
Or even, and we were talking earlier, even an example would be an owner who believes, they've never done a lot of this before and transitioned themselves out. They might have helped others if they're an accountant or a lawyer or somebody else, but when it's you, it's very different. And even with some experience of doing this, sometimes the agreements don't come in quite the same, or the negotiation takes a little bit longer, or whatever those things are. And so by setting deadlines and having that plan in place, many times it's not the owner's fault, but it looks like they're dragging their feet at times. So just the idea of, it's a journey, and with many unknowns and a lot of different moving parts within it.
Yep. Going back to that empathy, I can think of a specific company that you and I have both had the chance to work with. And one of the successors having that kind of aha moment of accurate self-assessment and being able to recognize, like, I have been really difficult. I can actually see, and I'm willing to see how I have not been kind or generous or patient with the individuals moving on, the people transitioning out. And I've pushed and I've sort of been mean, and for a person who is coming into an organization or coming into a leadership position newly within an organization, taking on ownership, taking on the business itself, to be able and willing to be vulnerable and see that and take responsibility for it what a phenomenal leader they will make.
Yeah.
How much trust will they create within their organization and the people and the culture of, you know what, this is, you can be patient, you can be thoughtful, you can take your time, you can make mistakes, you can change your mind, like all of those things that are really valuable for people and organizations to grow and develop. And it was just such a huge and fantastic breakthrough to kind of witness that, you know, that this person had gotten to that place, and, you know, it had a profound impact on the transition moving forward, you know, for the people transitioning out to really feel, to understand and feel that that was acknowledged, that that was their experience to that point, that they weren't just being difficult themselves, that they really had experienced that. So,
yeah. And so the concept behind that is, you know, we, as a firm, we have our rules of engagement, right? And our rules of engagement, the first rule of engagement is that you have best of intent always, and others do as well. And when you really practice that, which is not very easy to do at times, that everybody has best of intent. And so in this situation, so if you have somebody who is excited as the successor, wants to come in, wants to prove themselves, is ready, has thought about it for years, and it's like, oh my gosh, finally, I'm going to get to be the one, or one of the ones, right? I'm going to get to be that leader. And they're really trying to prove themselves, and sometimes maybe even frustrated. I was going to ask the why behind that. Sometimes so frustrated because it's like, come on. And we have many clients. This is not the unusual example. This is the usual example. So they're ready. And they get frustrated because the person transitioning doesn't move quick enough. Things don't happen quick enough. All of those different things. And that's just a piece of that. But what it does is it almost backfires on them, because if they're truly entrepreneurial and ready for this position and excited, the owner, as they start to walk through this, sometimes sees that as being pushy and too much, and, you know, and they're not quite ready to go. So lots of times, one of the things that I talk to owners about is that it's so great to have somebody who wants it so much that they're willing to kind of push you and kind of engage with you. But that's where I think a lot of that open communication and transparency has to happen. Otherwise, the relationship gets destroyed. And in many cases, what happens is the owner believes they may have picked the wrong person, or they're going down the wrong road. And so if the asset is being transitioned in multiple steps, sometimes they worry about whether or not they should actually complete it, because usually they've transitioned enough to still be the majority owner, the original owner. And then they're looking at it going, wow, this person's personality is completely different than I thought. And I'm just wondering if I made the right choice. So that open communication is so important.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, as I've been thinking about our conversation today, Elizabeth, you know, one of the things that I think is always good to acknowledge is that the work we're talking about is on top of all the work of doing the business. You know,
good point.
And you know, we're so in this space of moving owners and successors through these conversations and spaces and planning and thoughtful process. And, you know, it's very natural to us. And I think one of the things we bring is the unique opportunity to really guide those individuals, owners and successors, through this work, because if they had to do it on their own, on top of everything else, keeping the business afloat, keeping the business growing, taking care of all the people, all of the things, it is just overwhelming. And how would I possibly find the time to think about my communication to my successor or vice versa, or come up with a plan to mentor and train and pass on those skills? And because it takes a lot. It takes a lot. And, I think that I love that we can be that resource. I love that we have the opportunity to be that resource for business owners and successors who really want to have a transition go not just well, but go exceedingly well and come out in a stronger place than they might have even ever imagined was possible.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
That is cool. We have in a previous podcast that I did with Tom Kirk, who transitioned. He had, I think it was 6 transitions that he had done in his career. Yeah. And he's now retired and completely out of owning a business. He's still working in the business. But it was really interesting in that podcast. If you have an opportunity as the listeners to check that out, it's fabulous to have a transition that goes well. He said the first 5 did not go well. He said the last one that he did went really well. And in a community, he said, I said, what's great about that? And he said, I get to walk around and see my old clients and see the business running and see the employees still working together. And he said, I'm proud of that. He said, that's a really good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. What an amazing legacy. I mean, what truly a legacy to leave, and what a remarkable, just achievement. Just a remarkable achievement. That's really cool. Yeah.
And it does. I liked what you said about, just an added layer to business owners are busy running the business and doing all of the stuff that they do and have a full life, probably a little bit of an over a full life at times. And to add this transition piece on top of it really takes some focus and some intention to be able to do that. I think it's highly valuable. And truly in the end, I believe that it saves you time in the end, because it's just easier. I think conflict and all of that takes up so much focus and so much space. So, yeah. Well,
if it definitely saves you time, and if nothing else, it saves you energy. It saves you probably a little bit of heartache, and hopefully, and most likely, it could even save some of your relationships. And that's really what we want for everyone as they move through their transitions, is that they can keep those relationships that are most important to them intact. And that is not predictably going to happen if somebody's tackling this on their own,
Yeah. So I think we're at the end of our time, Marcy, and it went so fast. I can't believe it's, that we're here. So if you, I always ask at the end, what one thing would you leave with our listeners to keep in mind as they are beginning to navigate or navigating their transition? What one thing would you want them to just remember?
Oh, goodness. I probably would say this about every single one of my coaching clients and the transition clients we work with, is just hang out in the area of curiosity. It's a really powerful, positive place to be. When you find yourself resisting something, when you feel that other people are resisting you, the perfect place to go is curiosity, because that is where you will stop your reaction and you can open yourself up to what might be happening here and what can I do and how can I participate in finding a great resolution to anything. It can be to anything that you have going on in life, but it seems like curiosity is it's not something we typically go to very naturally, and but it's powerful. It's just so powerful, and it does wonders for relationships and communication and moving forward. So I love to play in that space.
Yeah, that's incredible, and a great thing that we all should practice all the time is that curiosity. So what a great thing to leave our listeners with. So Marcy, Thank you so much for joining us again and for taking the time to be here, and just so appreciate you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a joy to join you again, and I hope this was helpful for folks that listen.